Welcome to rural Mexico. We're looking for an ancient Olmec archaeological site called Chalcatzingo. And we are something like 3 hours or so drive south of Mexico City itself. Elevation about 5,000 feet. We've had to leave the bus behind because they're doing repair work on the road up ahead. And so join us on this adventure. Let's see what we're actually going to discover. So if you didn't know, in terms of timeline, you have the Aztec culture, destroyed by the Spanish around 1520. Before that, you had the Toltec. Before that, you had the Teotihuacan. Before that, you had the Maya. Before that, you had the Olmec. So there are clear Olmec and Teotihuacan influences in this area, and this shows how complex the landscape, ancient landscape of Mexico is. We are in the tunnel system underneath the largest pyramidal structure in the world here at Cholula in Mexico. This tunnel network is at least 10 kilometers in scale and has many different branches going off. This pyramidal complex was begun about 200 BC by a culture called the Cholulteca, and they were somewhat related to the people of Teotihuacan. And so Hernando Cortés, who was the infamous Spanish conqueror of this area, when he came to this place, he had the 5,000 people of this town area complex, the native people, all assembled together. He told them that he was going to have a great celebration for them. But instead what happened is that he brought a neighboring tribal native people in who were great warriors, and the 5,000 people of the Cholulteca who were here were all slaughtered in one night. And to prove his so-called superiority, he then had this church placed on top of the pyramidal structure to show his power and dominance over the people. So as Hugh Newman was explaining, during the initial archaeological work being done here at Comalcalco, supposedly a number of baked clay bricks used in the construction, especially of probably the pyramid we're coming up to, showed different forms of writing. Mayan, obviously, because this is a Maya site, but also supposedly Old World, as in, as he previously discussed, Egyptian, maybe even Chinese, Phoenician, etc. But the museum had no examples. So you have to conclude either that the story is a fabrication, or that these examples of writing which don't fit the normal Mesoamerican history have been hidden away on purpose. So what I've been looking for is evidence of the arrival of what is called the plumed serpent, known to the Maya as Kukulkan, and to the Aztec and possibly the Teotihuacan culture as Quetzalcoatl. And he is said to have been a light-skinned man with a full beard who came as a teacher from a distant land. Amongst the Olmec, there's almost zero evidence of his existence, but once you get into the Maya and the Teotihuacan and the Aztec, there's substantial evidence, because you see these figures with full beards, which Native Americans in general can't grow to this very day. So that possibly could give us a date as to his arrival, maybe around, literally around the time of Christ, but I'm definitely not saying that it was Christ. But that sort of timeline, 100 BC to 100 AD.
But it's a circle of fire.
When was this?
Es una bola de fuego.
¿Hace cuánto, José?
In the year 1996, 1996.
6 balls of firelight
6 balls of fire here in this pyramid.
landed on this pyramid.
En esta pirámide.
In this pyramid, up this pyramid, the people is scared. The people
Run away.
run away, allowed, allowed, no return to house. Together, every people asking him, what's happening with the pyramid? What's happening with that ball game? Where it came from? I don't know. It's fantastic. But that pyramid had a power. Somebody tell that.
We're at Palenque, which is on the Gulf Coast of Mexico, steamy jungle area. This is one of the great Mayan cities. Lord Pakal, who was the most famous ruler, was entombed inside this pyramid. In fact, there's a staircase from the top, which is now closed. 2 levels down, staircase down that way, turning 180 degrees, and then that way. And that's where his limestone sarcophagus lined in cinnabar, which is a mercury oxide, is located. And then his body was found, of course, inside this massive limestone box. No evidence so far of any lost ancient high technology at use here. It's standard Mayan construction of stone and mortar, but spectacular sight. This is the famous Avenue of the Dead at Teotihuacan outside Mexico City. It was built supposedly by the Toltec civilization maybe 2,000 years ago, and the famous Aztecs passed by this area as they were looking for their new homeland, which is present-day Mexico City, what was called Tenochtitlan, which means the place or the land of prophecy, or the place or land of the prophets. So it's actually likely that this little pyramid, which was built in front of the temple of Quetzalcoatl, or the plumed serpent, was done so on purpose to hide or partially isolate the temple of Quetzalcoatl in behind, because it's likely that it, in fact, was the most sacred place at Teotihuacan and could possibly be the oldest. The construction technique used at the temple of Quetzalcoatl is very different than the later works that we see, these little pyramidal structures that you see there. Lots of mortar used in construction. So as you can see, the staircase was made of quite homogeneous material. It looks like it all came from the same quarry. There was no mortar used in that lower section of intact staircase. Then all the material above is very inferior. And again, it's likely that the stone-on-stone contact aspects were original. Something devastating happened to the structure. And then the Toltec rebuilt in the area, incorporating the ancient parts. And that's what we find in Peru, Bolivia, Egypt, Lebanon, any place where there's an ancient site where there are aspects of megalithic construction. In the middle of a farmer's field here, near the Gulf of Mexico, in Mexico, and we've actually found, or are being shown, Tres Zapotes, which is the actual Olmec civilization site. We just went to the museum and bumped into Senior Victor, who's a local archaeologist, and this is something that basically no outsider bothers to try to find. So the site, these mounds, are at least 2,000 years old. A lot of the artifacts in the local museum, including 2 large stone basaltic Olmec heads, are from this area. They even found a stele, which is a flat inscription that had dating on it, and dated at, or the date spoken of on the stele is 31 BC, which predates the Mayan culture. The symbolism is the same you find in the Mayan culture, so that gives us an indication that before the Maya, the Olmec were the keepers and possibly producers of one of the world's most accurate calendar systems. So the local explanation as to what these represent are not Atlantean people, they're not aliens, but they're actually Toltec warriors. The headdress, you see snakeskin, and then you see feathers, so that's the symbol of Quetzalcoatl. This is one of the famous Olmec ball player heads, about 3,000 years old, and Ed, who was our geologist, has just told us that the material it's made out of is volcanic tuff. It's not basalt. Volcanic tuff is not that hard a material, so it is quite conceivable that even with Bronze Age tools or stone tools, that these Olmec people could have shaped these enormous sculptures. We're going to see, though, if there are also basalt ones, basalt being a much harder stone. So here we are in the Jalapa Museum, and we'll see what else we can find. So the Olmec are still a big mystery. They are one of the oldest, if not the oldest, cultures in what we call Mexico, dating back at least 3,000 years. We're an older culture than the Maya, the Toltec, the Teotihuacan, and the Aztec. And Olmec simply means the rubber people, and that was an archaeological name given to them because no one knows what they called themselves.